Every business relies on communication, be that through your email, social media, internal messaging, contracts, negotiations, whatever the case may be. Communication is the life force of any human relationship, and your business is no different. But you fail to realize that a single misstep in your business communication can lead to legal consequences. However massive or tiny the consequences are depends on the quality or the quantity of the mistake that you made. Now, the mistake can range from anything from an email that is wrongly worded, a false ad copy, a false product description, or a critique that seems to damage someone else's reputation. All of these things added together can be detrimental to your business. But don't worry, come along with me and I will tell you the legal aspects of business communication and how you can successfully and very, very easily manage your business communication so that you don't make mistakes and so that you don't have lawsuits waiting on your doorstep. But why does communication matter in your business? The very first reason is to avoid legal liability. The second reason is to comply with regulations. I know you probably didn't think about this, but you need to communicate good to be able to apply or comply with certain regulatory requirements. Think, for instance, now your consumer protection laws in your country that stipulate prices, the placement of your prices for your product, that they must be conspicuous, they must be truthful. Imagine the price of something you want to sell is $1,000 or 1,000 naira, and you put 9999999 at the very back in a place where customers can't see it, and then they get to the counter to pay, and then you're calling a different price for them than what is written on the product. That is cause for consumer protection commissions in your country to come in and, you know, raise issues as to why that price is number one, not written conspicuously where a consumer can easily see it, or number two, why is it that the price you wrote is different from the price they're being charged at the counter? So communications like that are required by law, and you need to keep up with them to be regulatory compliant. The third reason why business communication is important is because it protects and reinforces your business reputation. Your business is it's something called your brand tone. Your business is known by a certain tone, and the more you use that tone to communicate with your customers and your consumers, the more they trust it and the more they come to rely on it, and the more it bolsters your reputation as a business and your brand perception to the general public. The fourth reason why business communication is so very important is because it's easier to enforce contracts when your business tone is crisp, clear, assertive, straight to the point, and simple, without critiquing anyone, without going into shady business, without being too ambiguous for people to understand. It helps you enforce your contracts better because you say what you want, how you want it, when you want it, without mistakes. So these are the preliminaries or the reasons why business communication is important. Now that I've explained that to you, let's dive into the key legal principles when communicating as a business. The first legal principle in your business communications is obviously your contracts and business agreement. When you're entering into an agreement with someone, there are a few things you need to consider and you need to implement for that business communication to be tangible and legally enforceable. And the first is that every contract you have as a business with a third party must be written down. Verbal contracts do not really hold up in court because it no longer becomes a matter of what the intention of the parties are. It now becomes a thing of hearsay. You said, I said, this is my interpretation of what you said, this is how I perceived what you said, and all that. And that could go a million and one ways. So the courts try to avoid situations like that by demanding, even the law, by demanding that contract agreements need to be written down. So, the very first legal principle when you are communicating as a business is to write it down, even to as little as your internal memo in the office or a communication between a manager and a subsidiary in the office. It all needs to be written down. Now, as for contracts with third parties, there are certain elements of contracts that your business must have. First is that there must be an offer. There must then be an acceptance. There must then be a consideration that furnishes or that gives that contract life. And by consideration, I mean payment, whether that is in cash or in kind or in trade by barter, or however you guys decide to, pay yourselves for the services. There must be payment. There must also be a mutual consent. No one can be forced. You cannot enter into a contract by duress. It doesn't hold up under law as long as the person can prove duress. So there must be mutual consent before your contract can hold up. A second key legal principle of your business communication is confidential information. Now, as a business, there are certain confidential information that you have at your disposal. How you treat that confidential information determines whether or not it remains confidential. Now, how do you protect it? By having NDAs, by sharing that information to people on an absolutely need to know basis only. If the person you're sharing that information with does not need to know it, then there is absolutely no need to share it. So share it on a need to know basis only, and protect it at all costs. Protect it because confidential information is also an intellectual property and it's protected by trade secrets. But again, if you the only way to maintain it is to keep it as a secret. The moment it becomes general knowledge, then it ceases to be protected under intellectual property. The third key principle of your business communication is in misrepresentation and false advertising. Now, there are several laws across several jurisdictions that determine what counts as a truthful ad copy or a truthful advertisement. And there are certain laws, or there are many laws actually, that ban or that prevent or that avoid or that actually punish false information or misinformation or disinformation, depending on how it is couched and delivered. But to keep your ad copy, your sales copy, your marketing copy, or any other kind of information about your company or your product that is going out to the general public, you need to first of all be truthful. Use facts, not opinions, and make sure that they are not misleading in any way. For instance, if you have a product that is red in color, you know it's red, everybody knows it's red. You can't then come and say it's pink with a touch of blood in it. Like, that doesn't even make any sense. So do you understand what I'm saying? It cannot be misleading. It must be truthful, straight to the point, and very, very factual. You also cannot exaggerate or make false product descriptions or make misleading or misrepresenting ad copies. Again, they must be truthful, they must be straight to the point, and they must be factual. Once you do these, first of all, it maintains your reputation with your consumers and it helps you comply with consumer protection laws and advertising and marketing laws in your country, which is very, very important. The fourth legal principle in business communication is defamation and liability risks. We've all seen several high profile cases of defamation, one person against the other, saying something that damaged the reputation or that was seen to damage the reputation of another person. If you had properly worded your business communication, there is absolutely no reason why it should be flagged for being defamatory. Because once something is defamatory, it is subject to lawsuits. And nobody wants lawsuits, least of all your business, especially if you are in the tech world. Because once you have lawsuits, especially where you are the one being brought to task, it diminishes the reputation that your business strives to build. And that might take you years to rebuild, or maybe you might not even be able to rebuild it at all. So to be able to prevent such lawsuits, whether they are frivolous or they have, something, a substance to them, to be able to just prevent them in their entirety. Make sure that all of the business communication that you're putting out, whether it's about your business partners, your employees, the vendors you work with, suppliers, investors, whomever that is associated with your business, it must be truthful. It must be backed by facts. Facts that you can prove, not some. No, it must be backed by actual facts that people can put their hands on so that you save yourself the risks of liability and lawsuits. The fifth key legal principle of business communication is data privacy and communication laws. There are several countries now that are starting to implement and enact data laws, data protection laws, and your business needs to comply with those. No matter how small you think you are, no matter how big you think you are, you need to comply with the data laws across board. And your business communication helps you do that. How does it help you do that? By communicating to your customers, your consumers, that hey, we respect the data that you give us and we take appropriate care of it through things like your digital policies. If you have, a website, an app, a SaaS product, PaaS product, whatever it is, you need to have certain digital policies in place that communicate your respect of their data and the processing requirements that your company goes through and how they comply with the law. You also need to get the consent of your data subjects before you actually collect their data. You can't just go around collecting and using people's data when you do not have the appropriate consent it requires to get and use that data. Now, once you have gotten this data, once you have gotten this sensitive information, you then need to take the appropriate steps to protect it, either by encryption or by, I don't know, any other method that you can use to make sure that that information is adequately protected from outside use. These are the key legal principles in business communication, from the contracts that you sign or enter into all the way to data protection. Your business needs to take adequate steps to ensure that each and every information that comes from it, to it, or through it, or even goes around in it, is tip top, in tip top shape, and in accordance with the law to avoid liabilities and legal consequences. Now that I've told you this, what are the mistakes that businesses often make? These mistakes that they make run afoul of the law and end up getting them in trouble. What are these common mistakes that businesses make in their business communication, and how can you avoid them? The first is sending out ad copies, emails, or any other business communication without first proofreading it and making sure that they are free from errors and as structurally sound as you can get them to be. When you just send out emails like that, or send out ad copies, or send out, whatever kind of communication it is to the general public or your suppliers, vendors, whomever, without adequately proofreading it, that thing might be prone to mistakes, or it might have mistakes in them that you don't know until it comes back to bite you in the butt. And to avoid that mistake, proofread your contracts, agreements, business communications in general. Number two, sending informal contracts or contracts that are not legally enforceable to your third party. Now, there are certain elements or there are certain things that make a contract legally enforceable. And when you send out documentation that is not legally enforceable as a contract, then you will be in for a surprise when it's time to enforce that contract and you find out it's not legally enforceable. So, to solve that problem or to avoid making that mistake, make sure that all of your documentation is legally enforceable. Ask a lawyer or Google what makes a contract legally enforceable and implement it into your business contracts. Simple. Number three, posting defamatory statements online about anyone, whether it's your employees, whether it's your employer, whether it's your, business partner, vendor, supplier, whomever. When you post defamatory statements or statements that are untrue about someone online, you are liable for it. So do not, even if you're trying to critique someone, make it in such a way that it is backed, your critique of them is backed by facts. And make sure it's a critique, not an insult, or not something that is bound to injure or damage their reputation, because that will get you liable for sure. Number four is mishandling employee and customer complaints. There are several laws that demand that for consumer complaints, you need to handle it a specific and a certain way. When you handle your customer complaints in a way that goes contrary to what those laws state, then you are running afoul of the law and you are bound to get checkmated by the law. And nobody wants that, because when the law does, it comes down hard. The fifth one is sharing confidential information without restraint and without protection. Sometimes you just need to shut up. But like, you cannot just go around sharing confidential business information without restraint and without protection. First thing is, you lose the rights to that information as a trade secret or as an intellectual property right that is protected by law. You automatically lose whatsoever rights you think you had by that. One. Two, in the no specialty is then attached to that information. It now becomes general information or information in the general public. And we know what happens to information in the general public. It is subject to misinterpretation. It is subject to changes over time by translation when it moves from person A to B to C to D. By the time it gets to person Z, it has lost some of the truth in it. So don't have loose slips with your business information. You always need to protect your information and share it with those on a need to know basis only. Now that you know the mistakes that people or businesses make in their business communication, you know the key legal principles. What are the ways or what are the pro tips to ensure that your business communication is in tip-top shape? Number one, consult a lawyer like me if you have to make sure that your business communication complies with all of the necessary laws that it needs to comply with. Number two, stay updated on industry regulations so that your business communication is automatically updated and in line with those regulations. If you can't do it by yourself, again, get yourself a lawyer like me to help you out with it. Number three, train employees on the legal risks of business miscommunication. So those risks can include data privacy risks, the risk of contract unenforceability, and in any other kind of professional communication, your employees need to understand the gravity that the mails they send out, the business communication formats or informations that they send out, they need to understand the importance that they carry and they then need to treat it as such. But if they can't treat it as important if they do not understand the risks associated with it. So it's your responsibility as a business to train your employees so that they handle the business information with much more respect. Four, document everything. Every single thing, every single piece of information communication in your business should be documented, from emails to internal memos to that meeting you guys had the other day between just the employee and her manager. It needs to all be documented for future reference purposes and to avoid it being subject to personal interpretations. It needs to all be documented. That way, it's more reliable and more enforceable, even by the law. Five, use clear and simple and professional language. Again, don't go critiquing someone in public or online in a way that is not either truthful or backed by facts. Do not use ambiguous language that leads or tends itself to interpretation. Use simple, clear, and professional language in all of your business communication. And that brings us to the end of the video, guys. As you can clearly see, business communication is not just something you do flippantly. It is the life force of your business and you need to take it seriously. But as I mentioned earlier with contracts, there are certain elements that your contract needs to have to be legally enforceable. And in my next video, I'm going to show you what those elements are and how to draft a strong, legally enforceable contract. And for that, you need to hit subscribe so that you'll be updated and notified when the video is out. Thank you guys and bye.